3 True Night Shift Scares, Delivery, Beach House, Backroad. Before we dive into tonight's investigation, remember, hit subscribe, tap like, and turn on notifications, because the darkness never sleeps, and neither do the stories we uncover. The first case begins on a wet July night in Buckley County, Arizona. The hour was 10:47 p.m., a time when the last diners had gone home and most pizza shops had gone silent. But on the edge of a rural highway, a flickering neon sign still hummed above a small storefront called Rico's Pizza and Subs. Inside, 17-year-old delivery driver Chris Dalton stood at the prep counter, idly restocking drinks when a new order buzzed through on the cracked tablet screen. A large sausage and olive pizza, to be delivered miles past the official zone. He almost rejected it, until his manager, Russell Haynes, waved him on with a lazy grin. "Go on, kid. We haven't had a run in an hour. You could use the drive." Chris didn't argue. He punched the address into his phone and glanced at the printed note stapled to the box. "Park behind the house. Walk through the yard. Knock on the back door only." It felt odd, but not unheard of. He'd had customers who didn't want to wake children, others whose front porches were under repair. Still, as he carried the steaming box into the night, humidity clung to his shirt like a second skin. The air smelled of damp asphalt and heat-baked dust. The delivery car, a dented 2004 Corolla, coughed to life. He rolled down the windows for air, but the sound of cicadas was deafening. The farther he drove, the darker the road became, streetlights fading one by one until only the weak beams of his headlights painted the gravel ahead. The GPS arrow slid deeper into blank space. At 11:14 p.m., he slowed beside a narrow service lane that hugged a row of sagging fences. No house numbers were visible, just a stretch of unlit yards. He double-checked the map. This was it. He parked on the shoulder and stepped into silence. Even the cicadas had stopped. Halfway up the incline behind the property, his flashlight beam caught the white back door of a single-story home. Curtains drawn. No motion. He knocked twice, called out, "Rico's Pizza," and waited. Nothing. Then the curtain twitched. A brief ripple, like fingertips brushing fabric. Someone was there. Before he could speak again, tires crunched on gravel behind him. 2 unmarked sedans rolled to a stop near his car. Headlights cut across the yard, slicing the darkness in cold blue-white. A man stepped out, civilian clothes, a badge glinting in his hand. "Sir, step away from the house," the man ordered. "Right now." Confused, Chris lowered the box. The man's tone wasn't angry, just firm, practiced. Chris obeyed, backing down the hill until he was close enough to see more figures emerging from the cars. 5, maybe 6 officers, moving in silence, flashlights off, weapons holstered but ready. They fanned out across the property line. From the car, Chris watched as one officer tested the back door handle, shook his head, and whispered something. Another circled toward the front. The scene felt unreal, like stepping onto a movie set where everyone knew their role except him. Minutes crawled by. Then the first officer returned, crouched beside his window, and spoke quietly. "There's an active investigation here," he said. "You need to leave. Now." Chris stared, wide-eyed. "Someone ordered pizza from here." He pointed to the address slip, the name Jerry scrawled on the line. The officer took a quick look, copied the number, and shook his head. "Fake. You pulled up right in the middle of a surveillance." The words sank in slowly. Someone had ordered a delivery to a house under police watch. Whether it was a mistake or bait, nobody said. He was told to return to the shop and forget the address. He drove off, heart pounding, glancing at the mirror every few seconds. In the glow of his taillights, he saw the faint shapes of officers converging on the back door, moving with purpose, not panic. Whatever they were after was already inside. Back at Rico's, Russell barely looked up from his phone when Chris dropped the untouched pizza on the counter. "Customer wasn't home," he muttered. "Something like that," Chris said, his voice thin. He clocked out and walked to his car in silence, the parking lot lights buzzing overhead. It wasn't until he was halfway home that his phone lit up with a local news alert. Police arrest 2 at rural Buckley residence after night raid. Investigators confirm property linked to drug and kidnapping case. The address was the same one printed on his delivery slip. Chris pulled over on the shoulder, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened. The curtain's twitch replayed in his mind, the faint motion behind the glass. Whoever had placed that order might never have planned to open the door. He imagined himself standing there 30 seconds longer, pizza in hand, while an entire operation unfolded around him. The next day, detectives came to the shop to interview him. They confirmed what he already suspected: the order was never placed through the restaurant system. Someone had spoofed the app's address field using an external payment method, just convincing enough to print. Investigators believed the fake order was meant to test whether the property was still being watched. A probe. Chris hadn't been the target, just the signal. A human decoy walking right into the line of sight. For weeks afterward, he couldn't shake the image of that house, the cracked paint, the drawn curtain, the quiet knock echoing into nothing. He quit his job a month later and left town for college. But every so often, on humid nights when the air grew heavy and still, he'd catch the faint scent of hot dust and plastic and feel his pulse quicken. Somewhere out there, he thought, someone had been watching that house, and watching him walk up to its door. What neither he nor the officers realized that night was that the same phone number used for the fake order would appear again, tied to a call made from another coastal county, 2 states away, exactly 6 weeks later. And that call would mark the beginning of the second night shift scare. The beach house. The Oceantown house didn't look like a crime scene. From the street, it was postcard calm, a cedar shingle duplex 1 block off the boardwalk, porch lights amber against a salt-wet breeze, gulls drifting like scraps of paper in the midnight sky. Inside, Evan Carlin, 40, set a deck of cards on the patio table and listened to the hush between waves. His wife, Marissa, laughed at a terrible hand and topped off his glass. Through the sliding door, their sons, Jordan, 7, and Scott, 5, slept in separate rooms, sun-tired and sandy. It was Wednesday, 11:28 p.m., mid-July. The first sound was small enough to ignore, a faint tick, tick, scritched traveling the baseboards in Jordan's room. Evan told himself it was the house settling. Old pipes. Beach town quirks. But when Jordan padded out to the deck, hair stuck to his forehead, and whispered, "It's in the wall," Evan felt the back of his neck tighten. He set his glass down and followed his son inside. The room smelled faintly of salt and detergent. A Lego set slept half-built on the carpet. Evan killed the lamp and listened. Silence stretched, thin and held. Then, soft and steady, the sound breathed back into existence, scritch, scritch, low along the baseboard under the window. "Probably a mouse," Evan said, keeping his voice easy. He lowered himself to his knees, pressed his ear to the painted drywall, and waited. The noise stopped. In the pause, the house seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, as if answering, something breathed back, slow, measured, unmistakably human. Evan recoiled so fast his shoulder hit the nightstand. He pulled Jordan into the hallway and shut the door with his hand still on the knob. Marissa met them at the top of the stairs, eyes searching his face. "What?" "Call 911, he said. "Now." They moved on instinct. Marissa scooped Scott from bed, pressed her phone to her ear, and stepped onto the back deck where the signal was clean. Evan took the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and scanned the hallway. He felt the shape of the floor under his feet, the ghosted footprints of vacationers long gone, while his mind mapped exit routes, distances, and locks. At 11:33 p.m., the call connected. He heard Marissa's voice steady itself. "We have someone in our walls. 21 Bayview. 2 kids, both safe. We need officers." Dispatch kept her on the line. The house had a crawlspace. Evan remembered the inspector mentioning it once after his father died and the deed transferred, but he'd never found the hatch. He opened Jordan's closet and pushed the shirts aside. Bare plaster, a shoe rack, a soccer ball. Nothing. He dropped to one knee and checked the baseboard, fingertips grazing paint. There. A hairline seam. A panel the color of the wall with 2 old finishing nails sitting proud of the surface like improvised pulls. He didn't touch it. Instead, he backed out of the room and closed the door quietly. "We're going to wait outside," he told Marissa. He kept his voice level for the boys. "The police are on their way." They stepped onto the deck. The night smelled like tide and asphalt and the sugar burn of late funnel cake drifting from the boardwalk. Across the narrow alley, a neighbor's porch light clicked on, then off again. Somewhere, a drunk couple argued with the kind of volume that pretends it's private. Evan kept his eyes on the sliding glass. He tried not to breathe loudly enough to fog the view. At 11:39 p.m., a radio squawked on Bayview. 2 officers took the front steps with coached calm. One stayed with Marissa and the kids, clipboard out, voice low. The other, Officer Haynes, followed Evan down the hall. Evan pointed to Jordan's door. Haynes nodded once, slow, then flattened his palm to the drywall. The house seemed to exhale. From the other side of the wall, almost comically faint, came an answering exhale. Backup arrived, 11:42 p.m. A 3rd officer secured the back alley. The boardwalk camera at the end of the block pivoted on its pole, catching a slice of Bayview in its sweep. Haynes stepped back, lifted his radio to his shoulder, and said something Evan couldn't catch. Then, gently, he reached for the closet door. "Let me open and announce," Haynes said. "You stand behind me." Evan swallowed and nodded. The closet breathed cold laundry air when the door eased open. Haynes angled his flashlight low, haloed dust, and found the panel seam with the practiced patience of someone who knows how quickly things go wrong. He didn't yank. He pressed 2 fingers to each nail, found the wiggle, and lifted. The panel moved a millimeter. Then 2. Then it stuck. "Police," Haynes said quietly. "If someone is inside, make yourself known and keep your hands where I can see them." No answer. Haynes glanced back to confirm Evan was behind the threshold, then worked the panel again. It gave with a thin sigh of paint against wood. Stale air rolled out. The light probed into a rectangle of black, deeper than it should have been for a modest crawlspace. Haynes swept left to right, found foundation blocks, sandy soil, a smear of grime. No movement. He waited, listening. Something vibrated. It was distant and tinny at first, a mosquito in metal. Haynes tilted his head. The vibration repeated, a short bzzz, like an alert from a phone set to silent. He stepped back. "We'll hold until a second unit is at the hatch," he said into the radio. Then to Evan, "We'll keep you and your family outside until we clear it." They regrouped on the deck. Marissa had the boys wrapped in beach towels like awkward capes. "We're okay," she told them, a mantra. "We're okay. Police are here." Evan's eyes were locked on the sliding door. The night pressed its ear to the glass and listened with them. At 11:51 p.m., 2 officers went in low through the exterior access point they'd located beneath the back steps, a panel Evan had never noticed, a slat of painted plywood set flush with the skirt board, 2 screws removed recently enough that the paint wasn't sealed around the heads. The sand under the steps was patterned with small arcs. "Knees. Toes. Hold," crackled the radio on the deck. "We have movement. Unknown male. Back corner. Hands visible." Every sound intensified, the refrigeration hum from a neighbor's garage, the slap of a sneaker on the boardwalk, the mutter of waves tumbling. Evan caught himself counting breaths. He pictured the layout below his feet, the concrete pier blocks, the joists, the grid of darkness that had been part of the house longer than he had. "Hands," an officer commanded, "closer now. Do not move. Crawl forward. Show me your hands." A figure emerged at the edge of Haynes's beam, first a palm dotted with grit, then a forearm streaked with drywall dust, then a face caked in the residue of months. He looked smaller than the panic had made him, but his eyes were loud. They flashed from light to shadow with the quickness of a wild thing. He said nothing as they guided him, scraped belly and all, to the hatch. Cuffs clicked. A breath left the crawlspace like the house had been holding it. The boys didn't see the man's face. Evan and Marissa crowded the glass while the officers kept their bodies between the children and the scene. The man was led down the steps and across the narrow side yard where crabgrass grabbed at his bare ankles. He wore a t-shirt so coated with dust it had forgotten its color. As he passed the porch light, his head dipped and for a half-second he was just a contour cut out of brightness. "Do you know him?" Haynes asked. Evan shook his head. "We don't rent to locals." The house was empty until Sunday. Haynes nodded. "We'll get you a case number." His voice softened. "You did the right thing by leaving the room and calling immediately." The officers returned inside to clear the crawlspace. Marissa took the boys next door to sit on a neighbor's stoop and drink cold water, the universal currency of shock. Evan followed Haynes back to Jordan's closet. The panel lay on the carpet like a pulled scab. Haynes crouched, angled his beam, and made a slow inventory. The space was bigger than Evan had imagined, maybe 3 feet of clearance, running the perimeter like a shadow's hallway. Sleeping pad. Water bottles. A plastic bin with protein bars. A zippered pouch. A roll of duct tape. No weapons visible. No obvious booby traps. The air smelled like damp and storage, the muffled rot of forgotten summers. Haynes lifted the zippered pouch with a gloved hand and placed it on the carpet. "We'll catalog," he said. "But I want you to see what's relevant to your safety protocols." Inside, stacked with the neatness of someone who planned exits, were prepaid SIM cards, a multi-tool, a mini flashlight, and a cheap smartphone. The phone's screen was spidered with cracks and flecked with dust. It had been taped to the underside of a joist and was still warm. Haynes thumbed the side button with a knuckle. The screen pulsed awake. One missed call glowed at the top, a number with no name. The last 4 digits fixed themselves in Evan's mind the instant he saw them. "Those numbers," he said. "I've seen them." Haynes looked up. Evan didn't realize he was shaking his head until he felt the motion. 2 hours earlier, while he and Marissa played cards, their landline had rung once and stopped. He'd glanced at the caller ID on the kitchen base unit, curious who even had the number. No name, just digits ending in those same 4. Haynes's eyes sharpened. "We'll run it," he said, lowering his voice. "But let me ask, has that number ever contacted you before?" Evan opened his mouth to say no, then closed it. A memory slid into place like a card dealt face-up, the night they first arrived that week, the voicemail he'd ignored while they unloaded the trunk, a clipped message that sounded like a mistimed autodial. He hadn't deleted it. The end of the number, he realized now, matched. From the hall, a second officer called out, "Lieutenant, we've got something under the back steps." They moved as a group, Haynes, Evan, 2 uniforms, to the exterior hatch. The officer on one knee had his flashlight fixed on the underside of the step stringer. A plastic food container had been taped high under the rim, sealed tight. The tape peeled away with an unpleasant sound. Inside, nestled like something fragile, sat a second cracked burner phone and a folded delivery receipt from a pizza place 3 counties inland. The receipt had an address printed at the top, the rural house from Chapter 1, and a contact line with the same unlisted number. Haynes turned the paper so Evan could see the date, 6 weeks ago. His jaw worked once as if deciding which question to ask first. He didn't have to choose. The burner phone in the container lit up in the officer's hand and vibrated, screen flashing an incoming call from that number, the same last 4 digits, again. Haynes looked at Evan. "Don't answer," he said softly. The phone kept buzzing in that little plastic coffin, trapped under the steps, like someone was calling from close enough to hear it. The ringing stopped. And then, from somewhere in the alley, a car door clicked shut, soft, deliberate. "Units to Bayview," the radio snapped alive. "Possible observer in the rear lane. Dark sedan. No plates."